Okay, guys, I'm going to briefly take you through an introduction to the Romantic Age of English literature. Obviously, I did not make this presentation. My name is not Dr. Brenda Cornell, for all you know. Maybe I have an alias. Maybe I teach college. Maybe I teach English 2323 in my private life. But we are in British literature, even if it's not English 2323. And I'm going to introduce you to the Romantic Age of English literature. So obviously we're coming out of 17th and 18th century. This is kind of like late 18th century, which you'll see in just a second. But as you can see, there's not too many slides. I'm not going to go into presenter mode for this because every time I do it, it progresses before I'm ready to stop talking. So I'm just gonna leave it this way. So first of all, you guys might remember this if you were with me last year in English 3, which was American Lit. Because they also have a Romantic literature era, not exactly the same time frame, but just like it was in American literature, when we talk about Romantic literature in British Lit, it's not just about romantic love. That's not what romantic means when we're talking about the movement. Sometimes love is the subject of romantic art, but often it's not. But overall, it's an international artistic and philosophical movement that redefined the ways in which Western civilization thought about themselves and their world. And I guess, of course, you could say that for each era, because each era is kind of redefining itself based on a reaction from the era that came before. But Romanticism is a big one. So the Romantic period officially begins in 1798 with the publication of lyrical ballads by Wordsworth and Coleridge, and ends in 1832 with the deaths of Sir Walter Scott and the German Romantic poet Goethe, I believe is how we pronounce that. I'm not German, but they pronounced it that way in the 1994 movie Little Women. Winona Ryder said it, and that was how she pronounced it. So that's the official beginning and end, but as we're going to see on the next slide, those boundaries are a little bit loose. So like I said, I think I said this, Romanticism kind of affected all of the arts: literature, music, painting, philosophy, architecture, other types of visual art, everything. So it's the loose terms of it are like 1770s through the second half of the 19th century. That's kind of the time period that we're going to be looking at. So one thing that's very important in Romantic literature is the role of imagination. Imagination now replaced reason as the supreme faculty of the mind, which was why there was a flowering of creative activity during this period. So if you'll remember from our 17th and 18th century notes and the quiz, one of the things that they valued was like reason and logic. So since every era kind of reacts against the era that came before it, obviously, obviously, we're going to have a lot more imagination and emotion to be a part of things in the Romantic era. So for Romantic thinkers, the imagination was the ultimate shaping or creative power. We can do anything through our imaginations, through the power of our imagination. The imagination unites reason and feeling. Yeah, I agree with that. Enabling humans to reconcile differences and opposites. And that reconciliation is a central idea for romantics. It's kind of like the meeting of the brain and the heart in a lot of ways. Also, I super apologize for my voice. I feel like it probably sounds super scratchy. I've got a little bit of a sore throat. I do not have COVID. I got tested. Finally, the imagination enables humans to read nature as a system of symbols. So that might sound kind of weird. I think this has more about nature, on the next slide. So let's just go ahead and talk about that. Nature is often presented as a work of art from the divine imagination, like God, if that's what you believe in, which honestly, at that point, most of them probably did during this time period. They could kind of see nature as like God's big work of art. They believed that there was a healing power in nature, that it could be a refuge from civilization, and that its nature is organic or alive. It's not mechanical or rationalist. Also from last year, if you guys were in American Lit with me, English 3, you might remember that transcendentalism was an offshoot of Romanticism, and they were big on nature, to say the least. They were kind of all about going out into the woods and like isolating yourself and just trying to connect with nature, or like trying to connect with God through nature. And this is a similar idea. I don't think that the Brits took it to quite the extreme that we did in America. But nature is definitely very highly valued. There's a lot that you can get out of nature that can increase your creativity and your imagination. So when we're talking about romantic literature, we're going to have a much greater emphasis on the importance of intuition, instincts, and feelings. Again, kind of that marriage of the brain and the heart. Wordsworth, which I'm pretty sure Wordsworth was an American, so I'm sorry that his name is even on here, but that's okay, because he had a good definition of good poetry, which was the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. And when he said that, that was kind of a turning point in literary history. That's kind of how we started to think about poetry, the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. I know that probably those of you who write poetry are familiar with that feeling, that like you've got so much built up inside that you just kind of have to get it out. And sometimes you choose to get it out on paper, and that's how we get poetry, and it's wonderful. They also thought that the ultimate source of poetry was found in the individual artist and his or her traditions, past and present traditions. Excuse me. Individualism was a big thing for the Romantics. Again, we're going to someone who is not British to tell us about this, but Jean-Jacques Rousseau summed that up when he said, "I'm not made like anyone I have seen. I dare believe that I am not made like anyone in existence. If I am not superior, at least I am different." And while Rousseau might have kind of implied that he was superior to a lot of people, I think his major point there is to say we're all super different, and your experience is not identical to my experience. No two people are created alike, and we all need to celebrate what makes us uniquely us. So the romantic hero might look a little bit different than a lot of traditional heroes. We're usually not going to be seeing like a knight in shining armor during romantic literature. So sometimes the hero is portrayed as an artist, like a sort of deep brooding kind of person. The hero striving beyond the moral restrictions of society. So sometimes maybe our romantic heroes might be a little bit, I don't want to say off color or seedy, but they might break some rules. They're not always like good, upstanding gentlemen. And in fact, in the movie that we're going to watch next week, you will see a great example of a romantic hero. But they also might have a reflection of a hero who reappears from the ancient classics. There might be some sort of like parallel to be made between a romantic hero and like Odysseus from the Odyssey, or Beowulf, or any of these like big classic heroes. I think this is our last. Yes, it is. Romantic writers embraced everyday realism. They also sought out the folk legends of the past, and they promoted exotic ideas suggested by technology and the imagination. And this is a cool thing, in my opinion. This idea of like I'm just going to use their examples. A beautiful soul in an ugly body, like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which we are going to read pretty shortly. Or Victor Hugo's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And even if you haven't read those, y'all have probably at least seen the Disney movie of Hunchback, and his whole thing is that he's a lovely person, but people don't realize that because he's so monstrously deformed on the outside. Frankenstein is a little bit more complex, but basically he like never stood a shot at a normal life because of what he looked like. And that kind of comparison of like what's going on internally versus what you look like externally is a really cool thing that crops up again and again in romantic literature. So that's it. I'm gonna just end this, and hopefully you guys have taken notes. If you didn't, I imagine you could go back and watch this again if you need to. But that's it. Enjoy the rest of your e-learning day.